Welcome to Sarah Tells Stories. This story is based off of Plato's The Allegory of the Cave, but in a modern setting. It is called The Cave Was Never Real, a story of awakening. There was a person, let's call them Ray, who had lived their whole life inside a room. This room was comfortable enough. It had screens on every wall, soft lighting, and a constant stream of noise: music, news, influencers, ads, prayers, group chats, and warnings. The air was always cool, scented faintly with artificial vanilla and distraction. The shelves were lined with products: face serums, supplements, pills, lotions, spiritual books, rules, warnings. Everything Ray needed to become better. There was no window. Ray had been taught that the outside world was dangerous. Everything you need is in here, the voices said. We'll keep you safe. You only need to listen. So Ray listened. At first, it felt good. The products promised transformation. The voices said Ray would be worthy, loved, accepted, if they followed the instructions, if they changed themselves, if they obeyed. And Ray tried. Oh, how they tried. But deep down, Ray didn't feel better. The more they obeyed, the more they hated the person they were. They avoided the mirror. They cut themselves off from others. They heard whispers in their head that weren't theirs. You're wrong. You're not enough. You're disgusting. You'll never be free. The voices were like mold, growing in the cracks of Ray's thoughts. Ray didn't know it, but they were in a cave made not of stone, but of algorithms and advertising, shame and surveillance, spiritual abuse and fear-based control. One night, after another sleepless cycle of scrolling and comparing and buying and crying, Ray noticed something strange. The wall flickered. Behind one of the screens was something, a seam, a shadow. Ray leaned in. The voice in their room screamed, "Don't look!" But Ray did. They peeled back the screen. Dust spilled out. Behind it was a crack in the wall, and from that crack came something Ray hadn't felt in a long time. Air. Real air. Fresh, wild, untamed. And through that crack, just barely, Ray could see light. It took days to widen the crack enough to crawl through, maybe longer. Ray didn't know. Time in the cave was strange. But one day they packed nothing, tuned out the noise, and squeezed through the gap. The passage beyond was narrow and dark and terrifying. Their knees scraped stone. Their hands bled. There were moments Ray thought they'd die in that tunnel of shadows. Sometimes they screamed. Sometimes they went still. But finally, they emerged. The sun was blinding. It hurt to open their eyes. It hurt to feel their skin in the light. It hurt to breathe. Everything was so raw and real and alive. But once their eyes adjusted, Ray gasped. They were standing on earth, real earth. Trees swayed in the wind, their leaves whispering secrets. Birds flitted between the branches, not knowing they were free. The sun touched Ray's face with warmth, not judgment. There were people here too, others who had left their caves. Some were planting gardens, some were painting, some were weeping and laughing at the same time. All of them were healing. One woman held Ray's hands and looked into their eyes. "It takes so much courage to leave," she whispered, "but now you get to learn who you are without all their noise." In the weeks that followed, Ray began to feel again. They lay in the grass and cried without needing to know why. They cooked food with herbs that healed not just the body but the soul. Lavender to calm, lemon balm to lift the heart, nettle to rebuild. They listened to their thoughts and found so many were not their own. They spoke gently to their inner voice. "I see your pain," Ray whispered. "You don't have to believe them anymore. You were never bad. You were never broken. You were always worthy." They wrote messages on stones and placed them in the garden. "You are not the shame they sold you. Your body is not wrong. Curiosity is not sin. You belong here." Ray began to reprogram their subconscious through mantras, dreams, play, and stillness. They rewired the pathways of their brain like rivers flowing to fertile ground. With every step, they grew stronger, kinder, wiser. They stopped asking, "Am I good enough?" and started asking, "What feels true?" They stopped trying to be perfect and started learning how to be present. And one day, as they looked back toward the place they'd come from, Ray realized they weren't alone in the cave. There were millions still inside, and so they began to speak, not with fire, not with rage, but with the same warmth that had awakened them. They didn't drag others out, they couldn't, but they became a mirror, a friend, a quiet light for those ready to crawl toward freedom. Years passed. A new community bloomed around them, not perfect, not controlled, but honest, restorative, alive. People gathered not in shame but in remembrance of who they had been before the programming and who they were becoming now. And Ray no longer feared the mirror, because when they looked in it now, they didn't see the broken reflection shaped by propaganda. They saw a being who had listened to their pain, who had walked through the dark, who had chosen love, not because it was easy, but because it was true. The cave was never real, but the healing, that was.
The end of The Cave Was Never Real, a story of awakening. If you enjoyed this story, check out the other stories on my channel, Sarah Tells Stories.